And you are listening to Living Art on KPFT Houston Live. Hank was in the studio. So what's your story? Don't know the name of his new co-host, but good to see them back on the radio in Houston on Caroline Street in the flesh and blood. Great to be with you tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Michael Carson is the co-host of Living Art, and he's out in the other room with our guests, so I'm going to pass it over to. How you doing tonight, Michael?
I'm doing great, Michael. How you doing?
Are
you hearing me on your end?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and so welcome to Living Art. We have two great guests. Been talking it up beforehand here. An exciting day. Talking about a new exhibit at the Menil Collection tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then could you talk a little bit about that? Is Nestor?
Nestor, yeah. Hi.
Hey.
Yes, and tonight, Timothy Morton and I are collaborating and sort of getting prepared for tomorrow night. So,
gotcha.
And, yeah, we have a.
That's what we're all about here. Just laid back place to get prepared, talk about it.
Mm-hmm,
like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I'm
we'll.
Tim.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Yeah. So what's happening tomorrow night? What's the big event?
Well, we'll talk some more. But in conjunction with the exhibition of the iconic portrait strand, which is a body, a corpus of paintings that are Byzantine,
Okay.
and right. We're going to be looking at those and focusing a lot on those tomorrow night, and so preparing for that gives us an opportunity to explore that, but also to explore Timothy's writing and his work, because it really resonates well. Mm-hmm. Both of our endeavors resonate really well, and it's very exciting for me. And so we want to make sure that we know people are both our work.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And the collaboration too.
This is awesome. Just so for our audience out there, it's tomorrow night at the Menil Collection, right? Your exhibit's been on for a while though, right? Is that correct? Or is it starting in August? Or has it been?
Yeah. I'm not very good with time. I don't think it exists at all.
I'm with you there. I love that. Okay.
But nonetheless, there it is.
Right. Okay.
Sometime.
I do think it exists, Nestor, but
Good.
I'm still bad at it.
There you go. Yeah.
That's fair, I think. Yeah.
August. I think it was August.
August. So it's there now in this time frame, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
So next couple of weeks, I believe, and then tomorrow, important time for our audience, 7 p.m. at the Menil Collection, and you get to hear. You're going to be talking about there as well?
I certainly will.
Okay.
I'm Timothy Morton, and normally I write sentences about ecological awareness, and in a way, it's a good way to think about Nestor's work.
Really? Okay.
Because ecology is about coexisting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And in that room, which I highly recommend you go and see, people, it's not that you're looking at pictures in a gallery; it's that you're in a room being seen. The pictures are looking at you. Icons are supposed to be, traditionally they're alive, and they're so alive, Nestor, that this is is secular the right word? Because in a way it's how sacred ordinary life actually is. These are not like saints per se, but kind of they are, because they're just somebody that they're your friend. They sort of save your life when you feel terrible at 11 at night and you need to text them.
That
right?
sounds brilliant.
And so you're in this room. It's like everything you wanted out of Facebook, right? The little tiny square picture of the person online in whatever platform you like to use. Only these are people shining out of this golden space where they're kind of moving, and they're not. It's incredible, Nestor. It really is very, and the intersection really is that Nestor's working with Christian art, and I'm working with Christianity, because I'm just about to publish a book called Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so actually, these two things are really talking to each other, and it's a great honor and a privilege to be doing this conversation with you guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor to have both of you on tonight.
Oh, we're delighted to be here.
Yeah. Just to back up a little bit for our audience, the Byzantine icon, what is a Byzantine icon exactly? I know you explained it a little bit there, but they might not have any background on that. What would that be?
Well, and I want to be careful to differentiate, not disassociate, but differentiate the paintings, the iconic paintings from an icon. If someone was familiar with an icon, they could look at the work and they would know this. But there's not that much familiarity with it in the West. I grew up in the Orthodox Church environment as a Ukrainian American, and so really liturgical things. The idea, what an icon does, is something separate. It's a window. It's an access place to the noetic, to heaven, to this beyond that we can't touch in this realm. And it's not something that's an interpretation by an artist. It's something like a visual way to access beyond,
but
in
Nestor,
a spiritual way.
You know why you know why you can't touch it, right? Because in a way, Belinda Carlisle was right on the money when she said heaven is a place on earth, right? Like
that's right.
That feeling of alive, which is so beautifully preserved in the Orthodox tradition, as far as I can tell.
Yes,
Kind of is the sacred in a certain way. Like people are looking in the wrong direction for what is life. My daughter was just recently scanned using an echocardiogram. And the technician was creating this incredible sort of palpitating opal, looking at her heart, colorizing it on the screen, and it was this thing. And the Greeks have a word for it actually. It's called thumos, right? Thumos, gunkung. Thumos. It means palpitation, trembling, right? There's the concept of life, which is like, is this alive or is it not? Like kind of intellectual. And then there's the juridical one, which is called zoe, which is, does this creature have a right to live or not? But then there's this other one, which is more like this pure kind of vibrational thing. And that's the kind of life that's in that room. And it's, the strange thing is that this life feeling is the out of reachness. That feeling of out of reach,
right.
There is so much Christian contemplative stuff about just be a cloud of unknowing, right? And it overlaps with a lot of Eastern stuff, which is saying that feeling that you can't quite get it, don't fix it, that's it. And it's almost like simply like nerve signals arrive quite slightly late. So whatever this is, and I'm touching my face and my body and stuff, and I'm reaching out and touching the table.
Audience, yeah.
It's like whatever this is the future. Right, it hasn't happened yet to my brain, right? So this thing right here is literally just tantalizingly out of reach, and in a funny way, just to use a very posh word, phenomenologically, it's far out in the it's the furthest distance thing. Like the black hole in the middle of the Milky Way is closer experientially. I'm not talking about tape measure closer. I'm talking about experientially closer than that. And so I'm making this case in this book for the beauty of religion being actually the beauty of life, and I think that's your work in a nutshell.
Yeah, I remember the Jefferson Bible with the red words of Jesus in it, where you could just look at those, and I try to keep things simple in regard to the phenomenon of painting, where I started with empirical lines. There's something called a graphia, which is like the drawing and the cartoon and the underpinning, sort of like the map for the territory, where you start with the proportions of the sitter. I want to draw them live, but I was also using various lenses because I was fascinated by my friend Lawrence Weschler's collaboration with David Hockney in this book, using the lens in pre-Renaissance or Renaissance artwork. So I wanted to taste that a little bit and use those to sort of as a device. And there's also a way to use your brain and short-circuiting your eyes to draw in a similar way. It's fun to do. It's also gives you a very simple working drawing, an underpinning from there.
Do you think the eyes, because in philosophy, well, some people say I'm a philosopher, which to me is an insult. Possibly to me, possibly to philosophy, or both, right? But thank you for laughing. But basically, the eyes, that they're supposed to be different from, when you say I know, you say I see. You don't say I smell. And even if you say I hear, it kind of means I understand and tolerate, but I don't really agree. I see, right? And there's this kind of, I almost want to invent a word, alienation, like alienation, and the word I.
Yes.
It's almost like the I has been kind of torn out of the senses and made into this privileged thing. And it seems to me like what you're doing is having all this tech, some of it sort of malfunctioning, and kind of pulling this tech back into a more kind of medieval feeling, and trying to trick that, right? Like, it's not like you're trying to trick the actual eye. It's that you're trying to trick the whole thousands of year lineage of, like, seeing as a special different thing, you know, which is, you know, I could go on now and explain how that's really a form of nihilism, but I'll just shut up.
You know, I think it's a healthy form of discovery, because what happens after the drawing is there is a method that suggests itself within those boundaries, within the guidelines. There's a lot of things that can be different. And so it's like, I don't have to do anything. The foundation's already there in a sense. And now I can trust the fact that it tells me something. Kind of like when Louis Kahn says a brick wants to be an arch, then there's a structural imperative in actually building the painting with paint and the way it's built, which is the way icon writing has been done since about 700 or 800 AD.
So
but
you
to a different
are-
purpose. And
Pardon me.
Yeah.
I'm an expert interrupter. I'm on the radio. Where
Love it.
interrupting is forbidden.
No, it's great.
But
It's a good
like,
skill, yeah.
what you're doing there is you're listening with your eyes to
Yes.
the picture. Like, it's like anybody who's been in a band knows that acting versus passive is some kind of weird tweet from the Middle Ages that doesn't really work. But actually, like, when you act, it's more like you're listening or attending to. You know, and when you said it, a brick wants to be an arch. You said, this picture is talking to me. I'm attending to it, right? There's your life thing, right, in a certain way. That's what we're kind of talking about here.
yes, absolutely. And it'll talk to you. It'll tell you what it wants to be. The painting, what it wants to be. It doesn't. I'm not looking for natural light. I'm looking for an inner light, because the paints are already set up. All this stuff is already set up. It's like I just have to be there, and nothingness allows for reality.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
Nestor started to paint me today, which was an honor and a privilege, and he said there's a transmission going on. And I thought, yeah, there is. And I remember the last time somebody painted my portrait, oh my God, that sounds so pretentious. But there is genuinely a whole kind of taking a photograph really does steal your soul thing, where the painter is, or the photographer is, kind of sucking something from you. But there was this kind of interplay while we were doing the thing, where I was having something transmitted into me, and there was this kind of mutual quality. And again, if you go in that Menil room, it's a very healing place to go, because you're being seen by friends. It's everything you wanted out of Facebook but never get, because you just doom scroll and there's nothing there, and you're like, oh my God, no.
Yeah, it was a way for me to have a meaningful interaction with folks, where something I think important to me and special happened in a short period of time, and it wasn't loud and it wasn't superficial, and you know, it was a meditation in a way, and then it was also an acknowledgement of a certain window of control, and really outside of that was where things were really
but like a meditation in terms of being alive with other people, as opposed to some kind of special abstract thing that makes you enlightened. That's not it, right? Like, it was just literally being with other people, you know. And this to me is like, if you really want the essence of something like Christianity, it's about being with other people. It's about people coexisting with people without for no reason. Like, why do you need a reason to love somebody? Like, if you think, you know, it's kind of, it's over.
Yeah.
You know, well, it's their left ear. It's the smile of the Mona Lisa that I like the best. Okay, let's make 1 million photocopies of that, and like, look at that. Like, I don't think that's going to be 1 million times better, right? Like, and so there's a kind of unspeakable quality, right, that gets kind of, but you know, it's part of language, actually. Speech, real speech, isn't just words. It's this kind of ocean of energy.
Yes.
And the words are just kind of like the foam on the surface of the ocean, or like the receipts that come out of the cash register of a kind of listening process. It's like, after a while, people are like, okay, microphone, that's kind of what we're doing here, radio show. These words evolved, right? You'll never find the little old lady who first said the word shiznit in Los Angeles, assuming that it was a little old lady in Los Angeles for a moment, right? Because you have to say a word at least twice for it to be a word,
Right.
which means people have to hear it
Right.
twice. And so, like, again, like it's like listening with your eyes. I can't describe it any better than that. It's like your eyes get really softened in that room, and you forget that they are these weapons, like pointing outwards like arrows, trying to kind of command, control everything all the time.
The room he's talking about, and I just want to break with this discussion that really our audience gets a chance to eavesdrop on, is the room at the Menil, the main building, tomorrow night from 7 to 8, and it's Nestor Topchi in conversation with Timothy Morton, and both of those gentlemen have been kind enough to visit us here on Living Art, and just want to thank the audience without whom this wouldn't even be possible. They're kind of real, right?
The listeners, you see. Like, it's like when writing a book, I'm obviously thinking about what do I say to people, right? Like the second part of Aristotle's rhetoric is a huge exhaustive list of all the emotions he can think of and all the ways that people have them and how the people react and all that stuff. Because when you're speaking, you're actually listening, like you're attending to, and like even you're listening to something that isn't you from the future. Like when I was typing this book called Hell, In Search of a Christian Ecology, sometimes my fingers would just be working, and it's a little bit like what you're describing with this drawing. It's like my fingers are working and I can do this kind of stenography typing. We were talking earlier, does anybody need any? Because I'm 100 words a minute, I can do it. Very good laundry folding, you know, I love that level of life. And I'm typing away and I'm actually seeing this idea and I'm like, oh, that's good, I wonder what he's going to say next, kind of thing. Right, and people say that that's the zone or whatever, but it doesn't feel that special or different. It's just like, why else would you write? Why else would you work with someone if you could predict everything that could happen? Right, like there are people who want the future to be predictable, and they build walls and they interrogate people who come through those walls to make sure that they're the right people. But that's no fun, and that's how you become extinct. Like, imagine you're a single-celled organism, you're plopping through the ocean, yeah? And suddenly, it's about 3 billion years ago, right? And this guy can talk for some reason. He can talk to themselves, and they're plopping through the ocean. Boom! Oh, my expletive, did I just swallow poison? Like, that's what they would say, right? 300 million years later, some amoeba, like, no, that wasn't poison, that was another bacteria, and it symbiotically welded itself to the organism, and now we're animals because these things are mitochondria. And it's like allowing strangeness, allowing strangers in. And again, this room, Nestor, I don't know how you feel about the room, but it's a room of strangers who are not alien. They're strange, like their strangeness is that they're familiar, and their familiarity is a kind of strangeness, and it's this very warm uncanniness.
You just took the words right.
These people are aliens, and they need to be excluded.
You took the words right out of my mouth when you said uncanny, and that was like swimming around back there in my soup of a mind, and I found a sort of a window between the Proto-Renaissance and the Renaissance work where. It almost looks like the uncanny that we have talk about now, when something has this familiar yet not quite there, real somehow, or should I say the reality of it is distinct from something that we don't pay attention to. It's something that shows itself, and it keeps us in a sort of anticipatory state, almost like the arrest of beauty, when beauty moves you and you don't know whether there's poison here or there's some flower here.
For real.
You know? So the thing kind of, and this is sort of like the purview normally of abstraction. Abstraction is like uncanny without familiarity.
Let's go to the worst possible work of art ever, perhaps, which would be the crucifixion. Yeah, and once you've read it or seen it, you can't get that out of your mind. It's like, oh my God, I'm looking at this picture, but I'm actually looking at the Passion. And like, imagine if Jesus was crawling up to Golgotha there with the cross, and he actually looked at someone and winked and went, don't worry, this is all going to make sense in a while. There's going to be a religion about me, and that would kind of blow it. Right, the uncanniness of somebody who is, just to be very abstract and sort of theological about it, are they fulfilling Judaism or are they going beyond it? Is this icon of a saint, and what does saint even mean? This is Nestor's friend, but then again, saints were somebody's friend at some point, right? Like before they were, these are the official people that we've designated as the official religious people, and these are where you have the religious feelings. The uncanniness of just encountering another person,
Right.
is like if you take it to the level of absolute vomit, is still got this, that's where the essence of all the beautiful religions are, seems to me. Discuss.
Yeah, well, there's sort of there's the incorporation and the dogma and confusing a map with the territory, and then there's like saying we have achieved something here, something has been won here, and this is something that's given us scientific practice. I mean, the cloisters and all these things. None of this would have happened without that kind of giving in, that kind of calm abiding, and that kind of like strong affirmation of faith and discipline,
And
right, and yeah,
geometry.
that's right.
Like just the simple act. When Nestor and I say geometry, we don't mean doing things with protractors. What we mean is what the Greeks meant when they said you can do calculations only using a straight edge and a pair of compasses. You're not allowed to use numbers, because what it is your body moving. Like geometry literally means pacing on the earth, right? And like we were talking about this the other day, right? That actually there is a way in which geometry sort of is intrinsically sacred, and you're very interested in this notion of sacred geometry,
right?
And it works its way into your work that
right,
like everywhere, right?
Yeah, rectangles, we don't really look at them much because they're ubiquitous, I mean, but they're geometric shapes, and all of these constructs that we have are geometric shapes that have a place and a
I see them
taxonomy.
I see them in this room. I see them now.
You're starting to see them
There's
appearing
about
everywhere.
9.
Yeah, a lot of
They're
especially
there already
yes,
haunting.
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. The egg crate pyramids here. They're
Egg Crate Pyramids.
Everywhere.
Is that the name of our band?
egg crate pyramids. We also in addition to geometry, we also made some pretty good polemic pairs with Lennon and McCartney, and what they both need each other. And now I'm starting to go out there, but I'll bring it back in
as far out as you need.
With geometer. Is that the thing where you take the stick and you stick it in the ground, and then you walk in a circle, and that gives you the circle, and interlocking circles allow for crossed lines where the circle is interlocked, and everywhere there's a point where those lines cross, that's where there's an eye, by the way. Don't ask me how I saw this. I don't want to encourage people to experiment, but I've seen those eyes where lines cross, and everywhere there's a point, there's really an eye.
You're
everywhere.
like real human eyes, or
No, I'm talking about eyes that see you and you see them. I'm talking about, corner me sometime if this resonates with you, and I'll explain it in detail, but I don't want to explain it to the ether and have people think that anyway.
So Socrates and Jesus are often compared, and they both drew things in the sand with their fingers, and they did them at very significant moments. And when Mary of Magdala is about to be stoned for adultery, Jesus is just going, what are you talking about again? And he's just doing this sort of doodle in the sand. He's doing geometry, right, without the formal kind of under examination thing. And geometry is a contemplative practice. So the example I was saying to Nestor the other day was basically, so the city of Delos, there was a plague, right? We're talking about ancient Greece here, and they went to the oracle at Delphi, and the oracle said, the plague will go away if you can double the size of the altar to Apollo. So that's a geometry problem. Can you double the size of a cube using only a straight edge without numbers and a pair of compasses? Answer, you can't, but it took people 400 years to prove it using geometry. 2 of Plato's students proved it using algebra, and he got really mad at them because the numbers come later. When you decide to measure the world in a certain way, that's for a certain purpose, right? Like, say you want to colonize the quote-unquote Spice Islands, and oops, we went the wrong way. It's Columbus Day week kind of thing. And tomorrow, when my wife Trina, who lives in Jamaica, pointed out, that, one of the people on the boat there says, "Oh, look, there it is," when they pointed at Hispaniola tomorrow, right? Like the 12th of October is the day when they pointed at that. And technically Jamaica was seen a couple of years later. I'm going to be corrected because I'm probably wrong. But the whole idea of, like, we measured it, we're not really feeling it. We are X miles away from wherever, and this is where we predicted that these islands will be that we read about in this fantasy of the earthly paradise. It's like getting an asteroid. It's like Elon Musk with the asteroid, only it's the spice race rather than the space race. But they were going the wrong way, but they didn't care because they got the measurements right. And ... planet death.
Wow.
I've been Timothy Morton. Thanks for having me.
The planet.
There's a lot of leaves. Love it.
No, you just, yes, I do the same thing. I'm like, I was thinking of it. Didn't you understand that that you could read my mind? And, but seriously, planet death. See the silence? This is the silence.
Respectful.
What you said earlier, not the silence of the lambs. What was it? The silence of the what?
I'm writing a book called The Silence of the Lawns because I'm
Silence
trying to
of
get
the
people to
Lawns.
abolish leaf blowers.
That's right.
Where I live. They actually are the Menil collection, folks, if you're listening. But like, so Laurie and I did a gig once at the Moody Arts Centre.
That's right. I was there for that. Yeah.
And
right.
somebody
Laurie
asked
Anderson,
the question. They're like, "Well, what can we do given that the world is bursting into flame?"
Right.
And Laurie said, and this is very hard to do on the radio, folks. Laurie said, one of the things you can do is this. And I'm pulling a face. I'm not pulling a face. I'm letting my face be like a corpse face. Like Laurie does the best death face, right?
Yeah.
Just Google images Laurie Anderson, and it was like, oh, I can just be. Like, when were we not dying? When were we not going extinct? These things have always been true. This sort of frantic warding off of the end of the world / bring it on. Jesus never said anything about the ice caps burning, so he wanted us to do it, which is the thing that people actually say in Texas.
That's right. We've heard. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah,
You're good.
it's like the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, right? When one comes first, the one that's there to help is the thing that comes after we define the fact that we need help, and that's our hearts.
Man, that is so. Things that come chronologically after,
right,
are often logically before, right? Like, how come flowers? Like, the flowers came after plants, but they're saying something true about DNA, which is that it's not about utility because they're really expensive, unquote, to produce from a kind of that point of view. So there's got to be some kind of excessive thing in this life stuff, right? Like sexual reproduction came after cloning, but it's saying something true about DNA, right? Viruses came after bacteria, but they're saying something true about life forms, which is that they're permeable, right? You can pop that DNA out of the cell wall and suddenly you've got COVID.
Yes. And this portrait strand, I was thinking of a social and cultural DNA, actually.
So the takeaway from this is Nestor's icons come chronologically way after the icons of the early church, but they are logically prior to them, which is why they're so profound. What you experience in the room is the reason why the original icons were any good.
They were alive when they had a little bit of light on them. The gold makes it move. They're moving. And then there was, there have been later things like the movies were moving picture were picture shows where you just sat in an audience with opera glasses and the curtain opened and you looked at the painting.
Yeah.
It's a big painting. You could look at a lot of that. And then an orchestra would play and the motion happened in your head. The motion and the movements in your eyes. And your eyes are in your head.
So in one of the rooms of the Menil, there was the things that the surrealists collected, right? And one of them is a phantasmagoria, which is a great word because it both means the device and the thing that you see in the device. Mm-hmm. And you put like a candle flame in there and you see this kind of flickering, moving, and like the way you paint the faces, your eye is allowed to kind of slip around the figures and the gold is doing that thing. These images are highly phantasmagorical, if I may.
Smoke and mirrors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's that movement in the portraits.
There's a sort of a plasma that you find happens, like, these are iconic, They're not icons. I write icons, but these are not icons. But these are iconic. And then the plasma in the sort of clay bowl that's the glue for the gold leaf. When I put that on, I don't burnish it or polish it. I don't want a mirrored surface. I don't want to talk about perfection. I don't want machines, sort of a nod to production or modernity in terms of industry or anything like that. The stuff has a character of its own. It expresses itself as an element. So it's sort of fluid the way the gold leaf makes these patterns and shapes in conjunction with the other material. And I don't know what it's going to do. I just trust and know that it's going to be just fine.
But
And,
space, like in those pictures, literally space, unquote, is not blank. It's kind of luminous and flickery,
Yeah. It's a living space.
Yeah.
It's a spirit. In a way. And we talked also about architecture, and that's interesting because coming from like geometry, which touches everything, including biology and including all these other things, that it's sort of a map for territory in different ways. There are some shapes besides the rectangles in the portraits, and those definitely connect with the geometry of bifurcating things that gather in complexity. They divide. They go 2, 4, 6, 8.
Do we appreciate Nestor
and Tim,
Yay.
and Michaels,
Nestor.
the Michaels. So there's 2 Michaels here, and
Speaking of
they're right.
geometry,
There's 2 Michaels and there's 4 Mikes.
That's right.
Go figure.
Exactly
the words keep on
right.
spinning.
And geometry.
And geometry. So these are kind of like items in a genome where you have repeated things, or you have things that are splitting.
Michael and Mike are like the long and the short side of a rectangle.
That's right. Beautiful.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
Not very much.
Boom.
You're listening to Living Art on KPFT Houston live here on Caroline Street, and near here is Manil. And tomorrow night, Thursday, the 12th of October, from 7 to 8, Nestor Topchi is in conversation with Timothy Morton. Back to you, Nestor.
Thanks.
We were calling it living art, because living art could be an adjective or it could be a verb, right?
Right. Right.
Ooh.
Right.
Ooh.
Right.
You should have done this show 20 years. You'd really know what that meant.
Well, we love performance and performative, situational, and rising reality that it's explored like freedom is really, I think, at the crux of the thing. The genuine freedom and is like love that way.
It's not
right?
the same thing as freedom of choice, because in a way that's the ultimate prison. It's like everyone's floating around the same supermarket and they can choose different ideas that are on the shelf. This is your Althusser ideology theory, by the way. I can do Hegelianism when I try.
We're getting there.
But it's sort of like
Now
the
Michael's
idea of
excited.
freedom of choice
Now he's
is
saying
four-letter
your prison there, because you've got this. You're determined by that. You're determined by this idea that I can choose freely between these options that are available to me, like different types of shampoo. And you've lost the whole magical, I'm vibing with somebody who's vibing with me. And these paintings are like they're vibing with you, They are, they're exemplifying a thing that Immanuel Kant actually talks about. As he says, the beauty is a phenomenon. It's not a feeling that you're having. It's not in the work of art. It is a kind of, and he uses this German word Stimmung, which means attunement, right?
Yeah.
And even when you're putting the gold on, you're attuning to, because you're having to layer it. I'm imagining there are 3 or 4 processes at least that you use to make that happen.
Yeah, there's steps to go through, and you can actually look in the library at the Manil. There's a vitrine there that shows the steps, the process that have to go through, and there's a sort of a sort of a symbolism attached to the steps. That you have all the stuff. You got animal, mineral, and vegetable. So you have the tree of life as the wood, and then you have the bone as the gesso, because it's calcium and marble dust, and the glue, which is flesh, also to make the gesso, and then you have the blood, in a way, and you have the iron oxide of the clay bowl, and then you have spirit, boom, and this kind of quickening where the gold goes on. So there's a beautiful story and narrative that sort of attaches itself, vis-a-vis its relation to icons and icon writing, but yet that carries forward in a way certain things I can leave to the purview of a different intent. But with these, I'm free to find the incredible experience of these things each time.
Well, kind of it's like we were just saying about how sometimes things that come after something are implied by that something. It's kind of obvious, right? Like going to the toilet comes after eating, but like spirit comes out of this process, but that's why you do the process, right?
Right.
So it's the basis for that is that.
Right. Right.
Well, what do you say to viewers, and this is a general art question, who want to figure out how to take the art or what they're looking at? Because there are 18 portraits up, or do you have more?
124.
Or mounted?
And they're on boards, and they're on a shelf. And
I don't know where I got 18, but my point would be you might be overwhelmed seeing 100 portraits, and someone's like, what should I look at?
You think you're going to be, right? But these pictures, for a start, these little blocks, right? And they're at below eye height, and it's like they're on your shelf in your living room, or actually in your your dark corridor between your living room and wherever else that is, right, in your house. And you can choose to look at them or not, right? But whether you choose or not to look at them, they're looking at you, right? So after a few minutes, you get this feeling of, there's nothing in particular I have to do in this room. There's nothing special. I don't have to think special art thoughts. I live in a Menil house down the street there, and you wouldn't believe the number of cars that drive at a special, and I'm going to say this, folks, irritating, if you live there, museum
Respectful.
speed. It's over like 15 miles an hour. It's like, this is the museum speed.
Right,
I need to appreciate everything because actually I'm in a church. I'm not in an art gallery. I must stand very still. And one of the ways that your work subverts that is that this is not a white cube, right? Like this is not a place where these exhausted eyes on a trolley called the body get kind of dollied around by the feet that are aching, and you're like, and now I have to say a cool thing, otherwise the person I'm on a date with won't think I'm cool. All that stuff, you don't have to do it in that room. You're free from all of this ideological sort of training that we've gone through to basically like a lot of people who go to art galleries don't think they're religious, but actually they're being much more religious than a lot of people who go to church. Oh, I said it.
Right. Go to the Louvre to die.
Yeah.
You could die in a day.
Yeah.
3 days you will be incinerated.
Yeah, and it's like all art has an invisible laser beam in front of it, and how dare you cross that invisible?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Is you two are talking about the importance of the viewer to like be the artist or to engage in whatever they're experiencing, even if they're bringing in a bad mood or they don't want to be on that blind date.
I go in there especially in a bad mood. I go in there when I feel terrible. I'm a specialist at feeling terrible. I suffer from depression, and everybody hates me, and my mum's really weird, and like all kinds of stuff has happened in my life recently. And so I go there, and, just in general, stuff that's done for no reason is very relaxing for your brain, but it's much more than that in that room. It's like you get seen, right? It's kind of like, when you split up with someone and you're in a bar, this is going to be autobiographical in a minute, and you're on like the fourth or fifth beer or whatever it is, and you're basically getting something from the strangers in that bar that you couldn't get, possibly even from your very, very old friend. It would take longer to explain where you're at to that person than to these strangers, right, in a funny way. And so it's kind of like that. It's a very healing experience to be seen by people that Nestor knows, but you don't have to know them. It's kind of like you don't have to is the... Like, on the entrance to hell in Dante, it says, "Abandon all hope, all ye who enter here." Above that room, it should be, "You don't have to."
Forget about it.
Great.
Right? Like there's a bumper sticker that says, "Don't believe anything you think." But I think there's a better bumper sticker which we should make called, "You don't have to believe everything that you think."
Beautiful. Absolutely. What was it? Yeah, I was enraptured listening to this because it was really great. And what was I going to say next?
You're on the three sources of life or something, if you want to go back to that track.
Yeah, well, I also come to, back there somewhere was the vernacular of architecture and space, and at the center of the space was well, like an oasis, like the Tragic Poets house in Pompeii, or the colonial architecture that has a common space surrounded, and it's water and it's spirit, which is what the gold is, right? Too.
That room is smack in the middle, pretty much, of the Menil. It's this kind of. We were talking earlier about how like ancient houses would have this kind of rippling water in the middle because that was the spirit.
Right.
In the house, right, being protected by all the other elements.
You'd have a closed-in courtyard, and the water would be at the very center.
Like a spring.
A spring, yeah. And that all comes, a lot of the geometry comes down to architecture, and the architecture is interdependent with the paintings. So one of the beautiful things about this exhibition was working with curators and setting up a precedent where it was like how I had them in a chapel when I was working on them over on my compound by the pond there, and there was a shelf, and so we did the shelf here, and then also getting that color dark so that we could light the work as it would be, and that technology used in an old stone building, a church or cathedral, but have light coming in, a certain kind of light, and also candlelight. So there's an equivalent kind of candlelight, special lights in the ceiling, small ones that focus on the work, and then we got some tape up there to like barn door them down, so the light doesn't hit the walls, it just hits the work in that same temperature and intensity of a candle, which is pretty strong when it's close to something, and sometimes there's scorch marks on the work, but
Nestor, you said the right word there. You said curator, and I went thinking, aren't curators nice? And then I sort of thought, aren't editors nice? Because the editor of this book I'm doing called Hell is so good. And then I was thinking, aren't hosts nice in general? We've got these amazing radio hosts who are allowing us to freestyle here with gay abandon. And then I'm thinking the word host. Yeah. You are being hosted in that room. Now, host is a great word because host can mean friend. Right. Host can mean enemy, hostis in Latin. Right. It can mean the guest. And it can also mean the proprietor, the host, or whatever you want to call it. So it's everywhere, right? Being hosted, you get to be the host in every possible way in that room.
When you're the stranger and you enter the town, you're either going to be coming to dinner or you're the dinner.
Yeah.
Right. So it can go either way, and this is like this is at the heart.
When you're at the dinner, you go, "Women seem wicked when you're unwanted." You do that sort of Jim Morrison approach to being the stranger. Right. When you're down, that's right. When you're strange, that whole thing, right?
The barbecue version.
What did you mean about that?
But I think
cannibalism.
It's like, is this a master slave thing? Being the dinner or being the not?
I don't
think it is, man. I think it's not that. I think it's not that.
I think it's terrifying love.
It not be that for people.
Look at how terrifying. It's terrifying love. It's if we assign sort of. You could say the universe expresses itself somehow in this way, in this one regard, or you could say God or whatever you want to say. But look at how many creatures eat their loved ones.
Very profoundly.
Insects do this a lot.
Your work is about deconstructing, which doesn't mean destroying. It means something much better, which is undermining to make it safe so it can't hurt anybody anymore. We need to seriously abandon this concept of master versus slave. It contaminates everything. It's subject versus object. It's artist versus audience. Right. It's machine versus person. It's person versus animal. It's inhuman versus human. And it's structuring, male versus female, active versus passive. And in this room, that metric does not apply, right? And I was thinking, again, to go back to the Christianity side of things, someone offering themselves as the food isn't saying, I'll be your slave and just do whatever you want because I'm the genie/slave and you can just rub me and I'll do a thing. It's a much more intimate relationship than that. Now, if we're going to have a serious conversation about how to do world-scale politics, we've got to have a serious conversation about groups. And as Sigmund Freud says, groups are basically narcissists. And unless you do serious work on them, basically groups are the previous president of the USA, unless you watch out. They're all about inclusion and exclusion. And eating is all about that, right? Like Alien just wants to eat the universe, right? That's narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
This is a room
Yeah.
that actually could potentially heal you from that. And most psychotherapy says that is not a thing. Like psychopath is easier to treat than narcissistic. It's so like a baby doing this, I'm waving my arms about, is kind of cute. Oh, look at the cute, like a normal parent think, oh, I should feed this baby, right? But a 40-year-old person doing this is called alien.
Right.
You know, and there's so much alien going on, and groups in general behave like alien, and they tend to scapegoat people and reject them. This is a room full of people, and it's a group, but it's not that kind of a group.
Right.
It's another kind of a group that is, it's not including, but it's not excluding. It's not
It's
like dominating.
disconstructing.
It's not being the slave. It's a totally different kind of thing. You should go in there regularly as a kind of startup software for creating a new kind of future world where we are more ecologically, because we're more racially and gender-wise just and kind to each other, because how we treat each other is how we treat other life forms. And there are so many different genders and races and classes in that room, basically.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And you're
Amen.
hosting us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Amen.
To bring the hell
There you
into
go.
it.
Amen.
Let me
Amen.
ask the first question that came to mind, which was, who wants to be a saint?
Well, Forrest Prince said he wanted to be one. The late Forrest Prince.
Forrest Prince, yeah,
Yeah. And he was
for sure.
great. Yeah. You know, he was a really good friend, and it was always a blessing to see him. And we all have that potential, right? So when we're talking about like Buddha nature,
I'm so sorry. When you said Prince, I just thought you meant, Purple Rain.
right,
That's
right.
where I went, yeah.
Forrest Prince,
Yeah.
right, Houston artist.
Wow.
yeah.
Like, for a minute, I was like, he was a good friend. I'm like,
He's
I'm
kind of a
sweating.
saint.
I'm
He's kind of a
sweating.
saint. Right.
I dare to
He
speak
was
to
definitely
someone.
a saint.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That Prince.
Yeah. You know.
But it goes
Yeah.
to the question. Go ahead.
No. Yeah.
It goes to the question of the original saints, and
Right.
eventually institutions are formed, but original saints are just humans, right? They may not even consider themselves saints and so on.
Right. And how many of them there are them? There are saints among us. I talked to Chuck Close, and he said, "Are you going to put me in heaven, or are you going to put me in hell?" And I said, "Well, that's up to you." So it's kind of like we have Buddha nature, we have this, we can do this, but I'm not addressing that. I don't have that authority with paintings. It's not what I do. Although I acknowledge the archetypal, and I don't even know if that's the right word, of an icon is something that I have all the reverence or appreciation for, but I'm a painter in this regard. I'm not making
such
icons.
a good question, because it is Nestor sanctifying people by painting them, and what does that mean?
And art
Right.
really doesn't want anything to do with the saints ultimately, do we?
Well, beauty can go one way or the other, and so it might be a very specialist kind of thing. Art might be saying, "I just do eyes."
Yeah.
Right? The line from Blade
That's
Runner.
a Blade Runner.
Yeah,
a Blade Runner
yeah.
a day keeps the doctor away,
Right.
as they say.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not the portraits. They have the inherent, like everything, they have the divine in them, and the people in them who are incarnations of the living. What we see is the living universe, as God, or whatever we want to say. It's all to be. It's also precious and it's a treasure everywhere. So how to deal with that? I have to sort of, in the way that the human body also is super efficient. We only see a very small portion of things in focus with our eyes, because our brain can't be huge to capture all that information. There are ways to short circuit it when you could see a whole lot going on, but that shrinks down to a normal, manageable, and efficient sort of biped that can do things super efficiently and super well. And there's a lot that we're missing. There's a huge world of sensory that we can't see at all. It would just overwhelm us and destroy this armature.
Our memories.
A person. Our
You're
memories.
starting to talk about
Yeah.
the abjection, right? In a more ecological world, beauty would always have a little bit of a disgust fringe to it, because you'd be appreciating the fact that not only do human beings enjoy the Mona Lisa, but snails enjoy sliming their way down the painting. There's a whole way in which being a scientist means being an amplified artist, where you're willing to be grossed out in the key of love. Like, there was a biologist on the radio a couple of years ago saying he was crying because this sea lion mother was loving on him in the ocean, but he was also really grossed out because the way she was loving on him was by feeding him dead penguins. But this is also where religion in a good way lives, right? It's like the ability to include the vomit and the other body fluids of the world, and you see the wax and the gold for a start, and the powder and the egg in these paintings, and if I was a Freudian, which sometimes I am because I was in psychoanalysis for 25 years, oh my God, I paid this guy hundreds of thousands of dollars, look how sane I sound. But there's a correlation between gold and a rude word that I can't say on the radio that you excrete into the toilet. Right. And so the abjection is precious, right? There's a whole tantric thing about how the body fluids are actually the sacred things. And all religions are honing in on this kind of VIP lounge that is actually your own lovely body, which is, from an ecological point of view, is just a biological entity living in a biosphere that you grow out of, like pears growing on a pear tree, with a partridge in it. And then Lester said a thing because Tim had finished his shtick.
Oh, well, this tree of life is well, I'm enthralled. And so,
I'm sorry.
No. It's wonderful. I find that it's also part of what maybe a metaphor of an iceberg or a larger body, right? That the parts that you can touch and actually see are things that are like the fruit of a lot of other systems, and one larger mother system. We haven't talked at all about Ukrainian eggs, about pisanki, which, and I think the egg came before the chicken. Now that's for you.
Wow. Yeah, well, I made some kind of crepes this morning, like I often do for my son Simon, and you break that egg and you stir it in with some flour and you put some water and some milk in, right, and you just kind of leave it. And then you pour it into an incredibly hot pan. And if you mess with it, it's not going to be a crepe. You've actually got to paradoxically just kind of leave it alone to be this weird, palpitating, bubbling sort of blob in the pan. And that's what makes it delicious, right? And what makes the art delicious is a little bit of disgusting. But disgusting is basically death, right? It's like, if it was turned up to 11, this thing could kill me. Like, art in general you've got to have a little bit of death in the art for it to be delicious. Like, the toast has to be a little bit burned in order to taste good. The rice pudding should have a little flappy bit on it, otherwise it's not really rice pudding. And the crepe should have these burny bits, and it should look really like this weird flap of something. And that's where kind of whatever art is and whatever religion is are having a very interesting conversation, which is actually so much more about what life is than some kind of analysis by they don't have to be this way, because actually utilitarianism is about how things have a point, and all of biology is really saying life is a beautiful accident.
Doesn't have a purpose. The foam and the bubbles of the emulsion of the protein that are in the glue for the gold, and also that are in the egg tempera, which is an egg yolk. And you take the egg yolk and you dry it in your hand and you roll it around and you poke a hole in it and you pour the egg yolk out of the egg sac and you add vinegar and water. And when you use that with the pigment, the protein isolates the particles of the pigment, and that protein keeps it from oxidizing and also binds it together as it dries and as the water dries up and everything. So they're done flat and in puddles that soak into the gesso.
So in fact,
material.
These paintings are being held together and they're luminous because of life forms, literally because they're made of protein.
Yeah, the protein is the animal part. The protein is the part that holds it together, And at the end, the paintings are anointed with oil. The oil sinks in through the gesso and the pigment and the egg tempera, and it deeply goes into it, and it creates a kind of like it's a predecessor to varnish, but what it is, it makes like a kind of a linoleum where if a painting was found floating in the river, let's say an icon. Actually, icons have been found, back in the day, floating and washed up, and it's like, well, this is where we're going to build the church here. This icon miraculously floated because the protein kept it together.
Wow.
And the
That
oil sealed it. The linseed oil that sealed it up, made it incredibly strong and rigid. And the scale happens in the head because it's a small thing.
Yeah.
But, everything's big and small in the head, really.
Yeah.
That's where it happens. I mean, it's our perception is our thought. And so we shift scale with something, whether it's small or large, and that's where it makes its impact. So with these, it's possible to keep adding to this thread of portraits so it can keep going. It can go on and on and on. I can keep adding portraits. And as the community grows, it can also extend to other communities, and then pretty soon there's this really thin line seen from a distance.
Yeah.
And then you can approach it, and as you get closer, you see, there's agency in each one of these.
But it's not the kind of adding that, America is about. Again, if I was a Marxist, I would say, let's get some slaves and let's primitively accumulate a huge pile of wealth. Like, why is America the richest country in the world? And why is America all about piles, right? The biggest shoe ever, you sort of drive down. I wrote this opera about time, and my line was, "Welcome to America, the biggest pile of Europe ever." And in a way, this is not a pile like that,
right? We're not deconstructing.
Better.
So we're not approaching. And actually, those are your words from earlier, and I thought that was a good distinction. Disconstruction means that we're not doing that at all, right? What's the difference, do you think?
Well, you have an agenda, right? Like the Nazi aesthetic was all about, let's create huge piles of jewelry and shoes and dead bodies, and you've got this one size fits all. You're going to be dead because we're the Nazis, right? But whereas this is, I'm collecting you in a different way, right? I'm allowing you to be part of this community, but you're allowing me to be part of it too. And there's a kind of mutuality there that is very different from just assembling a huge big part, like it's like, porn collection of like a million zillion terabytes of the same kind of thing. But this isn't that, right? This is another kind of thing. And this is deeply talking to America, which from the point of view of a stranger, can you tell I have a souvenir accent here, is the land of piles. It's just like the biggest pile of everything. We've got the biggest crowd ever to see the inauguration is an American thing to say. The biggest pile. The trouble with that is that's literally fascism, because fascism is from the Latin word fasces, which means a bundle or pile of sticks, a gang, right? Yeah. So these paintings are like, if you want to unfascicize yourself, put thyself in this room.
That's beautiful. And also, you must read Timothy's books. Please. What are the books coming out?
Tell us.
Well, Earth Day 2024. Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology. Columbia University Press.
Thank you so much.
Can't wait to read this. Yeah, that was amazing. I really appreciate hearing all that. And so Living Art, thank you to our guest, and I feel I learned a lot tonight. And the show is tomorrow night, right, 7 p.m. Hear them continue to talk and kind of experience this room. And I think I'm going to head over there tomorrow, too. This is incredible. And so, Michael, you want to close us out?
Yeah. That was great. So we've got just a few seconds. Why don't Nestor and y'all give your contact information if people want to check you out.
Yeah, if they wanted to buy the book, how would they go about doing that?
Oh, sure. It'll be available sort of everywhere by Earth Day 2024, but you can always, if you want to talk to me, and we are connected now in some way because you've been listening, tbm2@rice.edu. TB like tuberculosis with an M at the end, Morton, tbm2@rice.edu. Just drop me a line and we'll talk. Also, I have a blog called ecologywithoutnature.blogspot.
This is Interim General Manager Sandy Wyman at KPFT, and I know what you're doing right now.
You're listening to KPFT, and that's only possible because for 53 and a half years, folks just like you have called that number, 713-526-5738, and donated to the station, or gone on over to kpft.org and click that donate button. We survive on...
Anyway, NestorTopsheet.com. Manil, you can go to the Manil Collection, check out their programs, and to see you around there too.
That's great. Thank you both for being on the show. Michael and the other Mike around the
I appreciate it. It's a great night. I had a lot of fun tonight. So.
Hey, next week is Fun Drive, so don't.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Beautiful.